Hello Smart Brains, welcome back to Preparation Easy. Today we will be starting with a new chapter. I hope you remember that in the first chapter that we studied, which was life processes, towards the end I explained to you how there is coordination, control and coordination in plants, where we studied about plant hormones. Today we will be starting with a new chapter called control and coordination in animals. Now there is one important note. When you look at other syllabus from other boards, what happens is they teach the same thing in different names. For example, some would call it the nervous system, some would call it the control and coordination, chemical control and coordination in animals. Here what we do is we are clubbing together the nervous control and coordination and the endocrine control and coordination, which is the chemical, where we are studying about the hormones. In this chapter we will be studying about both of these types, and we will see how both of them together, how both of them combine together to control and coordinate within our body. Okay, let's begin. So I hope you remember that in the first chapter towards the end we studied about the various hormones in plants, where we saw that plants don't really have a nervous system, right? Plants don't have neurons like humans or any other animals. Today we will be having an overview of the same. We will be having an overview of the human nervous system, or let's say for any other animals. But before we move on to the human nervous system, we will be looking at the insects. What kind of nervous system or organization do they have? Let's begin. In animals, the nervous system and the endocrine system together perform the function of controlling the systems and coordinating between various systems. Now, what do we mean by systems here? When we are referring to systems, we are referring to the various systems in our body. For example, the digestive system, the respiratory system, the excretory system, as we studied in life processes. I hope you are able to connect. Cnidarians, for example, have the simplest form of nervous systems, lacking brain. So, I hope you know, or at least you can figure out, that humans have a brain, or any other higher animal, for example a dog, a cat, they all have brains. But when you look at the lower animals, the lower kingdoms, for example cnidarians, kingdoms in the sense classes, not kingdoms, we are studying about kingdom Animalia here, out of which if we take the example of cnidarians, they don't have brains. So instead of brains, what do they have? They have a net of nerve cells only. So like we have nerve cells in our body, I hope you know that nerve cells are the longest cells in the human body. Similarly, cnidarians also have nerve cells, but they don't have a brain. So they don't have a brain which can actually control the various systems within their body. Since they are very lower animals, it's okay for them, right? They don't have a lot of complex mechanisms like humans, because of which they don't really require a brain in their body. Insects have ganglia, a bilobed brain and a ventral nerve cord. Now this term is important. When we study about chordates and non-chordates, which you will study in your higher classes, or I hope you have studied in your lower classes as well. When we study about chordates and non-chordates, one important point of differentiation is the ventral nerve cord. For example, we as humans or chordates have dorsal nerve cord. We have a vertebral cord at the back of our body, which contains the spinal cord, which is actually nothing but a lot of nerve cells together, right? Similarly, in insects are non-chordates. In insects, they have a ventral nerve cord. So their nerve cord is towards the front of their body, towards the belly side of their body. Okay, and they have a bilobed brain, which means that the brain has two lobes. For example, you can see in this diagram, these could be the lobes of the brain. This is first lobe, this is the second lobe. Okay, and this is a rough sketch of the nervous system of an insect. You can see there are thoracic ganglia. Ganglia is nothing but clusters of nerve cells. Okay, thoracic ganglia, which is towards the chest region of the insect. Let's think that this is the nervous system of a cockroach. I hope you could connect to the diagram of or the drawing of a cockroach. This could be the thorax area. This is how the ventral nerve cord is shown. We can't see it here, but of course it's towards the belly side or towards the ground of the animal. These are other segmented nerves. So these ganglia are nothing but nerve clusters, and from there there are nerve cells coming out. These are here abdominal ganglia. This is the abdominal region. So the ganglia over here are called the abdominal ganglia. I hope you can see now how simple the nervous system of an insect is, or any other lower organisms which are not humans, or any other higher organisms, for example dogs or cats. Let's move ahead. Okay, nervous system in vertebrates. Here we saw the nervous system of invertebrates. Now we will be looking at nervous system of vertebrates. They consist of nervous tissues which have specialized cells called neurons. So the nerve cells in our body are also called neurons. The nerve cell is the structural and functional unit of the nervous system. This is an important line. If someone asks you what is the structural and functional unit of the nervous system, it is nothing but a nerve cell. What do we mean by structural and functional unit? I hope you can connect that when we are referring to the structural and functional unit, we are referring to any kind of cell that could actually lead to the functioning of that whole tissue. For example, when we were studying the excretory system in life processes, we saw that the structural and functional unit of a kidney is nothing but a nephron. Similarly here it's neuron. I hope you can differentiate between the two terms because these are often confusing since they are very similar sounding terms. Let's move ahead. Okay, so before we are coming to this table, which is actually nothing but the description and functioning of parts of neurons, let's just draw a rough diagram of the neuron here. I hope you can remember from your other classes, or at least in life processes where we studied the overview of a nerve cell. This is just a rough diagram for your reference. This could be the dendrite. This is the cyton over here, which also has a nucleus, right? This the dendrites have very small granular structures called Nissel's granules. And also in myelinated nerve cells, I hope you remember from your last class from life processes, we have Schwann cells that secrete a myelin sheath. In non-myelinated nerve cells, Schwann cells are there but they don't secrete a myelin sheath, okay? And these here are nodes of Ranvier. And this is the axon terminal, okay? Let's move ahead. I hope now you can get a rough diagram of what the nerve cell looks like. Let's move ahead to the description and the organelles of a nerve cell. The first one being dendrite. Dendrite is a part of the nerve cell. It is a tapered extension of the cell body. The cell body, if you remember over here, this is the cell body and these are the dendrites, okay? What are the major organelles present there? There are cytoskeleton and mitochondria in there. The primary function of a dendrite. Why is a dendrite important in a nerve cell? It is to collect information from other neurons. This we will see when we study about synapse. I hope you have heard the term synapse. If not, we will be looking into it shortly in this video itself. The second part is soma or the cell body or the cyton as well. This is also called the cyton, okay? What is its description? If someone asks you to describe it, how would you say it? May have one, two or many processes, typically one axon and many dendrites. So when we are referring to the cyton, what we mean is these are all the various processes, okay? And these are dendrites, and one process out of that is the long one called the axon. It contains nucleus, of course, the cell body has to have nucleus, Golgi apparatus, Nissl substance, cytoskeleton and the mitochondria. I hope you can at least connect to what is the role of each of these organelles. For example, mitochondria is important for providing energy to the cell. The nucleus is important for controlling the activities of the cell. How is it passing its synapse? What are the neurotransmitters being released? Where are they being released? All of that is controlled by the nucleus. Why is a cytosine important? It can synthesize macromolecules and integrate electrical signals. So when we mean by electrical signals, we will also be studying about it when we study about synapse. When we are talking about integration of signals, what we mean is that when a signal is passed down from a nerve cell, first nerve cell to the second one, it is getting integrated or understood in the cell body. This is where the nerve cell is understanding that, okay, do I need to pass on this signal further, or do I need to pass on to an effector muscle, do I need to pass on to the brain? All of that is happening in the cell body. Let's move ahead to axon. Axon is the long process of the cell body. I hope you remember that. It is a single cylindrical, maybe many centimeters long, maybe myelinated or unmyelinated. We talked about all of this just right now. It could be many centimeters long. I hope you know that a normal cell is just a few micrometers big, right? But a nerve cell is actually centimeters long. By centimeters, this statement is actually telling us that a nerve cell is so long that we can actually see it from our naked eyes. It's just that the thickness is very less, so we can't really see them, but I hope you can see its comparison to its length with other cells. The other cells are just a few micrometers big, but a nerve cell can have the length up to a few centimeters as well. It may be myelinated or unmyelinated depending on whether the Schwann cells are secreting the myelin sheath or not, right? What are the major organelles here? Since it's a small passage, it has a cytoskeleton, it has mitochondria and transport vesicles. Transport vesicles are important. We will study about it when we are studying about synapse. And what is its primary function? Its function is to conduct information to other neurons. So this is where one neuron, the signal is there in the cell body. Now this signal is being passed to the axon, and this axon will pass it to the other neurons or the effector cell, wherever it needs to be passed. Okay. The final part is axon terminal, which is the end of the axon. Terminal, as the name suggests, is the end. It's also called the synaptic ending. We'll study about synapse, as I said. It has vesicles filled opposition to part of another neuron. Most are exodendritic or exosomatic, but other configurations occur. You don't need to worry about the terms used here. All you need to know is that the axon terminal is important since it has minute vesicles. It has neurotransmitters filled in it, which are important for transporting the signal from one nerve cell to the other. It has synaptic vesicles and mitochondria. If you remember, if you can see, all parts of the nerve have mitochondria in them for energy production. Its primary function again is to transmit information to other neurons. Okay. I hope this part is clear, this table is clear to you. You can see how each part of a nerve cell is important to the cell's functioning and for the body as well. We need to pass on signals, right, for the body to function. Okay, coming to the types of neurons. We just saw a normal neuron cell. Now there are other types of it as well in our body itself. Let's have a look. The first one being a sensory neuron. What do you understand by that name? Sensory, for example, you know about the sense organs in our body, right? For example, touch, skin, smell, there is nose, for sight there is eyes. All of these are sensory organs. What do? They sense about the external environment. Similarly, the sensory neurons have a similar function. So whatever the body is sensing, that information has to go to the brain for further activities, right? Let's say I am sensing that the weather is cold. My body needs a cover. I need to wrap myself in a blanket, let's say. How is our brain functioning that? How is our brain knowing that? Because the sensory neurons are passing that signal from our skin to the brain that, okay, the temperatures are getting down and we need to cover ourselves. Okay, let's have a look at the definition. They receive impulses or signals from receptors and pass them to the central nervous system or the CNS, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord. We will be looking at the types of nervous system in our body shortly in a few more videos in this chapter itself. Right now we are looking at what is a sensory neuron. I hope this definition is self-explanatory to you. you can understand that they are actually receiving impulses from the external environment. From the external environment, whatever our body is sensing, they are integrating those impulses and then passing on to the brain. So the brain is now deciding what is our next step. In the next step, there are motor neurons. What do? They transmit signals or impulses from the central nervous system towards the effector. This effector responds to the stimuli. Now, my body is sensing that the temperatures are getting down and that I need to cover myself in a blanket, let's say, or I need to go close to the heat. What is our next process? Our brain needs to signal our body that okay, now you need to move, you need to shiver, or you need to get yourself a blanket. How is that happening? It's happening through the motor neurons. So the sensory neurons pass the signals to the brain. The motor neurons pass the signals from the brain to the effector muscles. The effector is nothing but all the muscles that are now working or showing the effect of that stimulus. The third type of neurons are relaying neurons. These neurons function as links between sensory and motor neurons. They occur mainly in the central nervous system. So when we are talking about the central nervous system, what we mean is that the motor neurons are occurring in our brain and in the spinal cord. What are they doing? They are acting as link between the sensory neuron and the motor neuron to pass the signals between them. Okay? I hope these definitions are clear. Let's move ahead. Coming on to synapse. We heard so much about synapse. We saw how each part of the neuron is important for a synapse to happen. What actually is a synapse? It is the junction between two neurons. I hope you have studied in cell tissue in your lower classes that all of our cells, let's say the epithelial cells, have some kind of junction between them, gap junctions or adhering junctions. If you have not heard these names, don't worry, you will study about them in your higher classes for sure. So similarly, our neurons also need to have junctions between them. That is how they pass signals from one cell to another. Okay, by now we have established the fact that neurons are nothing but small packets that can transmit signals. Let's listen to it that way. Okay. So for those packets, there needs to be junctions between them. That is how they are passing the signal from one cell to the next. A synapse is formed when the axon terminal of one neuron comes in contact with the cell dendrites of the other neuron in order to exchange or pass down signals or impulses. Now, a few important things. Signals and impulses are the same things. A synapse is formed when the axon terminal of one neuron. I think we have a diagram of that too here. This is the axon terminal of one neuron. Can you see here? This is the first neuron. It has its cell body over here, let's say. This is the second neuron. This is where the synapse is happening. Now what is happening in the synapse? Let's have a zoomed in look. This is the axon terminal of the first neuron. And then we have the dendrite of the second neuron. And here these are the signals being transferred, okay? I hope you can connect, you can imagine where the axon terminal is, where is the cell dendrite, how are they connecting or getting in contact to transmit the signal. The axon terminals bulge out to form presynaptic knob. What do we mean by the word presynaptic knob? Do you know a doorknob? It is circular in shape. You can use it to open a door. It's there to open a door, or let's say drawers also have knobs, okay? So knob refers to nothing but the shape of it, the bulged out shape or the circular shape. Pre refers to before. Synaptic refers to synapse. So when a synapse is happening, the before neuron or the neuron that is ahead of the other neuron, that axon, the axon of that neuron is called the presynaptic knob. This over here, can you see it has a circular structure, this whole thing, that is why it is called a knob, and this is the presynaptic knob or the presynaptic neuron. The dendrite terminals form the postsynaptic depression. Depression is nothing but a hole, let's say. If your father has a car, let's say, you might hear him saying that okay, there's a dent in the car. What do we mean by dent? A depression, any kind of hole. the dendrite terminals form the postsynaptic depression. We are clear with the word depression. Post refers to after and synaptic refers to synapse. Let's have a look at the diagram. This over here is the the presynaptic neuron or the presynaptic knob, and this is the depression that we are talking about, the postsynaptic depression. Post in the sense that it's happening, this is where the synapse is happening, and this area is called the postsynaptic area. Okay. Synapse transmits information in one direction only. This is an important point. What do we mean by this? When we are looking at this diagram, you can see there is a presynaptic neuron, there is a postsynaptic neuron. What is happening is the information is being transmitted from here to here only. It is not going the other way around. For example, what we mean by this is dendrites can't transmit signals to axon terminals. That is not happening. We need to remember that. The examiner might trick us asking that do the synapse occur in both ways. For example, when we studied about transportation in plants, we saw that phloem transports food both ways, right? However, xylem only transports water in one direction. Similarly, in synapse, the signal is being transmitted only in one direction, be it throughout one cell or in a synapse. Throughout one cell in the sense that the signal is coming in here and it's moving towards the axon terminal. That is the only direction. It does not happen the other way around. We need to remember that fact. Have a look at this slide. See what are the important terms that we need to know. We need to know what is meant by an axon terminal. We need to know what are cell dendrites. We need to know the post and presynaptic knobs and depressions. We need to know that synapse transmits information in one direction only. I believe that is clear. Let's move ahead. Let's just have a look at this diagram again. You can see there are synaptic vesicles over here. Vesicles are nothing but small sacs that contain some kind of substance. For here it could be a neurotransmitter. A neurotransmitter is any kind of substance that can act as a signal between two neurons. Okay? Just like we have hormones in our body, similarly we have neurotransmitters. These here are voltage gated channels and they open or close depending on the levels of calcium ions in the surrounding fluid. Neurotransmitter, see these are the neurotransmitter molecules we just saw. These are again ion channel receptors. So a receptor is nothing but any kind of substance, any kind of structure that will hold these neurotransmitters. So these neurotransmitters will fit in here and then they will pass the signal to the next cell, to this cell, that okay, now you need to release neurotransmitters for passing on the signal. Now this could be any kind of signal. If let's say if you are having a jerk, if someone pinches you, what do? You have reflex actions. Those are happening because of these signals. We will see them in the upcoming videos. This is the presynaptic neuron, this is a synaptic cleft. A cleft is nothing but a gap. In Hindi we might call it khai. Okay? If there are two highlands and in between there is a depression, we call it a cleft. Similarly, here this is called a cleft and this is a postsynaptic neuron. Let's move ahead to types of synapses. In human body, we see two types of synapses. However, only one of them is very prominent. The second one is very rare. Okay, so we don't really study examples of it. The other one, most of the synapses that you hear in the human body, those are chemical synapses. Okay, the two types of synapses could be electrical synapse and chemical synapse. As the name suggests, can you think of what could be the differences between these two? While you are thinking, let's read. The membranes of pre and post synaptic neurons in electrical synapse are in very close proximity. Electric current flows through this gap from one neuron to another. Electrical synapses transmit information faster than chemical synapses and are rare in our system. As I just said, they are rare in our system. Now let's decode what each of these statements mean. When we are saying that the pre and post synaptic neurons are in very close proximity, what do we mean is that this part, this cleft that you are seeing, it is a very small gap. a very small gap compared to a chemical synapse. And why is it small? So that electric current could flow through it. How does electric current flow? It flows in a jumping way. Okay. You might hear the word saltation. This kind of flow is called saltation. If you haven't heard the word already, don't worry, you will study about it in your higher classes. Just for your reference, I wrote the word here. So, the electric current flows through this gap from one neuron to other. In this kind of synapse that we saw, we have neurotransmitter going on. Okay, neurotransmitters flowing. But in electric synapse, we have the electric current flowing. Electric synapses transmit information faster. Of course, they will transmit it faster because the gap is also less and there is electric current. Can you think of how fast electric current is? As soon as you switch on the fan starts moving. As soon as you switch on the light bulb glows, right? That is how fast it is. So, if these synapses are happening in our body, they have to be very fast. Okay, let's move on to the second synapse, which is chemical synapse. As the name suggests, there could be some chemicals being used here. And what do we call those chemicals? You are very correct. They are called neurotransmitters. We have been using this term a lot in today's video. Neurotransmitters play a major role in transmitting the signals from one neuron to another. Of course, they are synapses, so their job is to transmit signals, be it electrical synapse or be it a chemical synapse. Impulse conduction is a little slower compared to electrical synapses over here because chemicals are being used. And the synaptic cleft, as we just saw here, the synaptic cleft is a bit bigger compared to the electrical one. Okay, and that's why it is a slower process. Now, with this, we are coming to the almost towards the end of this video. Today we saw about neurons, the overview of a neuron, and we saw an overview of synapses and the types of neurons. Okay, let's move on to the recap questions. Let's see how much can you recall from today's video. Select the incorrect statement. Let's start reading from the last option. You can read from the first one as well, it does not really matter. You need to be very careful. What is it asking? Incorrect statement. So let's just write down our keyword for our reference, false. It's asking for a false statement. Relaying neurons act as connecting links between sensory and motor neurons. Sensory neurons help transmit signals from the central nervous system to the effector organ. Chemical synapses transmit signals much faster than electrical synapses. Electrical synapses are rare in our systems. Now, what can you see in this question? Okay, I believe you got the answer. There could be some discrepancies. Let's come back. Select the incorrect statement. We can see that this statement is correct for sure. Relaying neurons act as connecting links between sensory and motor neurons. That's their job. This statement also seems correct. Electrical synapses are rare in our system. That's what we just saw in the previous slide. Chemical synapses transmit signals much faster than the electrical synapses. I hope you can see that this statement is the exact opposite. Okay? Sensory neurons help transmit signals from the central nervous system to the effector organ. Now, in this type of question, both these options are wrong. I hope you can see that here, if this statement was supposed to be correct, we should have had motor neurons. Okay, so in this situation, either this question could go for a bonus or both of these answers are correct. So what you have to do in such situations is mark any of the one that you feel is the answer. Don't leave this question, because there will be students who will mark either of these options and get a score, right? So you can't leave any of these statements. Let's move on to the second question. The axon terminals bulge out to form the. What do the axon terminals form? We studied about them when we studied about the overview of a neuron. We studied about them when we studied about synapse. What do axon terminals form? Think. Where do you see the axon? When we are starting from the cell body, do you see it on the top of the cell body or below the cell body? You will get your answer. Do they form the postsynaptic knob? Do they form the axon hillock, or do they form the presynaptic knob? I believe you got the answer. They form the presynaptic knob. Just for your reference, have a look at this slide. This is the axon terminal that we are talking about, and it's forming the presynaptic knob. Okay, I hope that is clear. Postsynaptic knob is formed by the dendrites because they are receiving the signal. Axon hillock does not really do anything. It's just when axon is being produced from the cell body, that junction is called the axon hillock. Let's move ahead to the third question. Which of the statements is true with respect to the nervous system in insects? This question is from the very first slide of today's video. They have a specialized and well developed nervous system similar to human beings. They only have a few neurons. They have a dorsal nerve cord. It consists of ganglia and a bilobed brain. We saw about two important organisms apart from the human brain, apart from the human nervous system in the very first slide. If you remember, we saw about cnidarians. We studied about insects. We had a diagram over here considering the nervous system of insects. What do you think could be the answer? Of course, they don't have a very specialized and well developed nervous system since they are not so complex organisms. So this statement is wrong, and it's asking us a true statement with respect to the nervous system in insects. They only have a few neurons. Well, they do. They don't have very few neurons. They have good amount of neurons. If you remember, we studied about the thoracic ganglia, we saw the abdominal ganglia, we saw other ganglia in between, we saw the brain. So it has some neurons, not very few. So this can't be the answer. This could go for cnidarians, if you remember. That is what we studied when we were studying about the nervous system of cnidarians. They have a dorsal nerve cord. Is that so? Isn't it that the chordates have a dorsal nerve cord? For example, humans, we have a dorsal nerve cord, right? In insects or non-chordates, they have a ventral nerve cord. So this statement is wrong because of this one word. So we got our answer that it consists of ganglia and a bilobed brain. By bilobed we mean two lobes. Okay? I hope you can see how these three statements are not correct. Let's move on to the last question of the video. Select the correct statement. Now, again a statement based question. Synapse transmits impulses in both directions. Sensory neurons are absent in the human body. Relaying neurons are found in the central nervous system. Dendrite terminals form presynaptic depression. What do you believe is the answer? We have to find out the correct statement. Dendrite terminals form presynaptic depression. Is it so? Wasn't it postsynaptic depression? We see dendrites when the signal is being received. If that neuron is receiving a signal, it is called the postsynaptic neuron, or it is forming a postsynaptic depression. Relaying neurons are found in the central nervous system. Okay, sensory neurons are absent in the human body. Is that so? Don't we have sensory neurons? I hope you know that we have sensory neurons. What do we need them for? Transmitting signals, right? Synapse transmits impulses in both directions. Is that correct? So this statement is wrong. We know that this statement was wrong. This option D, is that statement correct? Synapse transmits signals in both directions? No. That was what we studied as the last line when we were studying about synapses. That synapse only transmits signals in one direction. So for any neuron or any kind of synapse or junction between two neurons, the signal is being transmitted from first neuron to the second neuron, not the other way around. Okay, please remember that fact. So we got our answer that relaying neurons are found in the central nervous system. And what do we mean by the central nervous system? We are referring to the brain and the spinal cord. What do relaying neurons do? They act as the link between sensory neurons and motor neurons. I hope all of this information is clear to you. I hope you are able to recall and understand what are the types of neurons, what are the type of axon, what are the types of synapses, where do we find these kind of synapses, what kind of synapses are common in the human body. In the upcoming videos, we will be studying some more detail about the brain, a few more hormones when we study about chemical control. Okay. Till then, stay tuned with Preparation Easy for more such videos. Thank you.